welcome to the Firehouse Roundtable podcast, brought to you by the Ventura Fire Foundation. I'm one of your hosts, Peter McKenzie, retired fire captain with the City of Ventura Fire Department, and my co-host, Jason Kay, active battalion chief with the City of Ventura Fire Department. We are going to bring awareness to real issues that face firefighters and their families. We want you to feel like you have a seat at the kitchen table, which every firefighter knows is the heart of the firehouse. Let's get right into the episode. All right, welcome to another episode of the Firehouse Roundtable. I'm your host, Peter, and today we have a special guest host. Anyway, Jason is tied up, wasn't able to be here, so we have Joe Booth, who's our executive director, who really is the guy who does all the behind-the-scenes work for the foundation. But Joe, welcome to your first time co-hosting.
Yeah, it's exciting. I feel like I'm a minor leaguer stepping up to the plate for the first time.
I don't know about that. I think it's the other way around. Probably we're coming down to your level, or no, that didn't come out right either. Anyhow, nonetheless, let's introduce you to our guest. So we have Mike Canny, who is a retired firefighter, which I'm sure we're going to get into, and is also the vice president of tax services with the Firefighters First Credit Union. Mike, welcome to the show. Correct me if I messed up your title or anything along those lines, but welcome.
Yeah, welcome, Peter. Nice to meet you, Joe. Thanks for having me on the podcast. So, yeah, you're correct. I'm a retired firefighter out of Illinois.
Tell us a little bit about your fire service career.
Well, my dad, he was a firefighter for 30 years, and then my brother got on the fire department. So I was kind of like destined to be on the fire department. I had wanted to as a little kid. I guess most of us wanted to as a little kid, want to be a fireman growing up. I got on the fire department in 2003 in Springfield, Illinois, land of Lincoln. And I spent most of my time there on the engine. I did a little bit of time on battalion car as a safety officer, but most of my time was spent there on an engine in Springfield. I retired from Station 8 in Springfield, it's a busier engine house, but mostly with like medical calls, a lot of retirement homes, and
how big was the department? What are the numbers kind of?
So we have fully staffed for around 230 members, but nowadays we're down, I think it's sitting maybe around 205, 210 at the moment. They're short staffed just like everywhere else, but they've got 12 stations, opening up a 13th one here soon. They're in the process of building their 13th station. 12 engines currently, 3 trucks, 2 battalion cars.
Oh, nice. So pretty good little department, good size. So you guys probably ran some calls. So obviously we're here to talk about taxes, and you have a career or retired from a career in the fire service, but tell us about the other half of your life that you're doing now.
Yeah. So before I was a firefighter, one of the things growing up, my dad was big on, he's like, I'll help you get on the fire department, but the deal is you have to get a bachelor's degree first. So I got a degree in accounting, became a CPA. In 99, I did the public accounting thing, but as soon as I could, I started testing, trying to get on the fire department. I'm like, all right, I got my bachelor's. And so I finally got on the fire department in 2003. Leading up to that, I'd worked in public accounting, and also I'd worked for a movie theater chain that was throughout the region, doing books and stuff for them. And on the fire department, I'm like, well, I don't need to work for anyone else, but I'd love to start doing taxes for people. So I started doing taxes for other firefighters. Obviously, that's how it starts. So 2006, I started up my own business, the fire department, doing taxes. And from there, it just kind of snowballed. I added bookkeeping. I added auditing. It was a pretty decent sized company by the time I retired. So my wife, she's a CPA as well. She stayed at home with the kids while I was on the job, and she was able to take over my accounting business so I could leapfrog over to Firefighters First and start offering taxes to the firefighters of the credit union, which is Firefighters First Credit Union.
Awesome. Go ahead, Joe. Go ahead.
So I'm not a first responder, so I'm kind of learning how things operate. But one of the things I've learned is that every firehouse has usually guys that play different roles. Were you the guy that everybody came to for financial advice and for help?
Throughout the day, especially during tax season, I had a lot of, impromptu tax appointments throughout the day. So whether it be calling the station or, hey, I'm working higher back today, you mind if I pick your brain for a little bit on taxes? And So it always kept me busy during tax season.
Nice.
So
you turn that into a business for yourself.
Correct.
Nice.
Yep.
I got a question about how this all started, because I mean, you were a CPA, respectable career, and then you said, no, I don't want to do this. I want to go be a fireman, but you kept doing it. Like what made you not want to be a CPA professionally and want to go join the fire department? It was just because your dad and your brother was doing it, or?
No, I wanted to be a firefighter long before I wanted to be a CPA. So it was, at the time I was good with numbers. During growing up, I was good with math, not so good with science. So I'm like, all right, I'm going to try the accounting route. And I did that. I actually enjoyed it, much to my surprise. I enjoyed the CPA route, but I was sitting around a lot, and I'm like, I don't want to be doing that. I want to be working with my hands. And so I started testing for the fire department, and man, I mean, there's no better job than the fire department. But yeah, I wanted to be working with my hands, and I enjoyed the fire service, and it was fun.
Interesting. Yeah. We don't get a lot of CPAs, joining the fire department. Not that it hasn't happened before, but it's not like a common path that people take. Like, I'm going to go become a CPA, then join the fire department. A lot of people, anyway, very, very interesting. I always find it in the fire station, you got people from all walks of lives. We had an attorney that became a firefighter at ours, and he didn't last very long, but he was an attorney, went to USC law school, had this great career as an attorney. And he was like, I'm going to be a fireman, and comes in, and it's like, okay, this is interesting. But anyhow, so you have an interesting perspective, which is, just before we lay a little groundwork, that one of the things with the podcast that we're trying to bring awareness to is like financial awareness, and teaching firefighters and their families, like, these are the things you need to be looking out for. This is how you can improve your finances. This is, how you can maintain your stuff. This is all the type of things like that. And this obviously is going to be one of those episodes, but you have a unique perspective, because not only do you understand the finance side, but you understand the firefighters' point of view as well, which is unique. So and I'm sure, since you were the guy in the fire station that everybody went to, which makes sense, like, what are some of the common things that you see firefighters doing that they, maybe shouldn't be doing, or mistakes they're making financially? Like, could be broad, could be specific, but I'm sure you have a list of things in your head that you see over and over again firemen doing. So
yeah, well, I mean, a lot of it is, I can't stress enough just getting the advice of a tax professional, because a lot of the guys, firefighters are do-it-yourselfers. We like to do everything ourselves, so we like to understand that. So we find a little bit of knowledge, and we start going down a path, and then we think we're doing it right, just to find out we did it wrong. So a lot of times with people set up businesses, that's something that it's, as many firefighters as you probably know as many businesses they've started up, right? Because every firefighter, it seems, has their own side gig. And just getting that set up right, like S corporations, they can be a great idea for some people, but there's a lot that goes along with it. And so people start down this path of, I heard so-and-so tell me I need to be an S corporation, so that's what I'm going to do. Or I've got to be an LLC because that's what so-and-so did. Well, it may have worked well for one person, but it's not going to necessarily work well for you. So you just need to understand, consult with a tax advisor and a lawyer for entity type selection to make sure you get the right entity, because that's something that can be really costly down the road when you're trying to set up your own business.
Interesting. So Springfield, middle America, I think there is a difference probably in general, like pay wise, with firefighters on the coast versus someone in the Midwest. In your experience at your department, did most of the guys have other jobs or other businesses? They
did. And our department paid well, but we had a lot of people that in the downtime, they was just like, I'm going to make leather shields. I'm going to, we had our own lawyer too. We, just like you had a lawyer on your department, we had a lawyer on our department who did some of that work. So it just seemed that to fill up that void, that extra time that they had, a lot of people had their side jobs. It wasn't necessarily financially motivated as much as it was, just a little bit to get ahead and just something to do in my downtime.
Gotcha.
Stay out of trouble.
Yeah, I find that interesting. So I guess, in California, it's not as common as it once was. So if you talk to some of the guys that, the generation before, like a lot of guys had their own, a lot of them were in the trades. plumbers, electricians doing other businesses. We don't really see that as much now. It's almost like the minority that do that. I was one of them. I own a property management company while I was at the fire department. And I don't know if it's because we're understaffed. Guys are working an incredible amount of overtime. I just don't think they have the capacity to do it. But I think it was a lot more common the generation before, not so common now. Interesting to hear your perspective that, no, yeah, they're still doing that in other areas. And I don't know if it's a staffing issue or what the demands are on the guys, but just interesting, different perspective.
Yeah. And I've seen it change too over the course of my career. It seemed like a lot more guys stayed at home with their kids later. The younger guys on the job when I retired, you could see it started head of that direction that you're talking where, they're staying at home. Their wives are, oftentimes making more money than they are. So on their days off, they're trying to bring down daycare costs and, it's definitely been a shift.
Yeah. So one of the, I don't want to say controversial topics, but like when it comes to doing your taxes as a fireman, right? Like somebody inevitably tells the fireman, oh, all this is deductible. That's deductible. Station dues, this, that, right? And it's always like a debate. And like some CPAs are like, oh yeah, we're going to deduct everything. And some are like, you guys are crazy. You're all going to get audited, right? So what is your position on like, one, I want to talk about the common deductions for firefighters. And then let's try to bring some clarity to, can you do this? Can you not do this? What's considered risky? What's considered conservative? Like, let's open that can of worms if you don't mind.
Yeah, let's open it up. So we'll just start off with California is unique because in 2017, the tax laws changed across the country and unreimbursed business expenses, they went away at the federal level. So everyone lost at the federal level and most states followed suit. So California, though, you can still have the unreimbursed business expenses, which is what everyone's talking about when they're like, oh, I can deduct my meals. I can, all my mileage, go through that. So California, you can still deduct that. It's called the unreimbursed business expenses. And the easy ones are that you can deduct without much controversy. It's going to be like your union dues, any clothing that you buy. If it has like a logo on it that is for the fire service, for your fire department and stuff, it is specific to the job. So anything that's specific to the job that you buy, you can deduct. So a lot of guys on my department carried like personal tools. So those were always deducted. Always had a pair of trauma shears, flashlights, notepads, anything you think about that you buy, you spend a lot of money throughout the year, for the fire service. You just sometimes don't realize how much you're spending. Just keeping track of all that. Even you can use estimates as well, just to kind of, on some of these lower dollar items, just to kind of get a gauge as to what you spent. So those are easy ones. Professional subscriptions are another easy one. But then we start getting into meals. So can meals be deducted? That's the hot button topic in most stations. That was in Illinois. And so that really comes down to what are the rules surrounding the meals. So that meals for firefighters has been litigated quite a bit through the years. So there's some tax court decisions that kind of guide us. And one of them was based in California. And it said that if your meals are required as part of the job and you have to pay for them whether you eat them or not, then they can be deducted. And this was a court decision. It was based back when there was integration within the fire service, and the fire department said, you have got to participate in meals. Everyone, it's going to be one common fund, and you have to do that. So under those circumstances, they said, yes, you can. There have been a lot of other attempts to do it when they weren't required. And the IRS, every time they look at it, they say, no, you can't, unless it's required, you cannot deduct it. So if you deduct meals beyond that, then if you get audited, what happens? If you get audited, then you get in trouble. The problem is most people never get audited. So they're like, oh, well, I've deducted the last 10 years. It's got to be fine. I've talked to several people who have gone through the IRS audits, state audits, and when they start looking at these things, they get removed right away. It's not something that you're going to be able to talk the auditor out of. You're going to be paying the taxes and penalties related to it if you do get audited and find it. So then it's about your risk tolerance. So maybe it's a gray area because maybe your department requires it, but you're not quite sure. We're required to do it, but we don't have to pay in certain circumstances. There's there's a policy for why you don't have to pay in. Well, then that's kind of great. It doesn't quite follow what that tax guidance was, but I'm comfortable deducting it. If there's a SOP or SOG or something on the books that says you have to participate, then we can say that, yes, we are required to participate. So it's trying to figure out where that gray area is. But if it's black and white, like my department was black and white, you didn't have to participate in any meals. It was, a lot of people would bring, their own food in sometimes if they were on diets and stuff like that. There was no requirement to pay in any kitchen dues. And so it was not deductible there. But California, there's a lot that have it written into either contracts, policies, and procedures. There is the expectation of paying in those dues, which can make it deductible.
Gotcha. Yeah. At our department anyway, there's no policy about anything. Like if you want to chip in and participate together, great. If you want to bring your own food, that's fine too. There's literally nothing in writing. But I think that's the biggest potential deduction. If you're deducting every one of your meals, for all the days you're there, it adds up. Let's talk about what the actual penalty is. What happens if you get audited, and what are the fines, or what does that look like?
So if you get audited, basically they're going to go back and they're going to look at, a year under audit. So they're going to pull up a year. They're going to start looking at that year. If they find that there's an issue with that year, they can expand the scope of the audit. And so that means they can go back further. The penalties related to it, that depends on their view of why you misstated your deductions. So if they thought, if they think you're doing it as a misunderstanding of the tax law, it would be treated differently as, trying tax evasion would be treated more seriously. So most likely you're going to have penalties. You're going to have the interest on it. The penalties can be pricey just because it depends on how far back they're going. So I've had people get audited. They go into 1 year, then they open it up all of a sudden to 3 years. So it's, it can be frustrating. It hits you all at one time. But the true risk of an audit, I think the IRS is roughly 1% to 2% that you're going to get an audit. So out of 100 guys on your department, the likelihood of an audit is, one of those 100 guys is going to get an audit a year. They also target, if you look at the audits, they target high income people and low income people, and usually people in the middle are not targeted as frequently for audits.
Yeah, I know my personal experience was when I first got on the fire department, I was doing my own taxes, and then I found out, there's these tax professionals that cater to firefighters. Okay, I'll go see one of them. And there was a lady down in San Diego that did it for all the guys, and was great. I was like, oh man, I'm getting these big refunds now. This is awesome. And then I started investing in real estate. And then from that point on, I was like, oh, so all these fire department deductions are really like pennies compared to like the benefits of investing in real estate. So then I started focusing on that. And then my personal opinion now is like, yes, some of those deductions matter, but they're not going to be what makes the difference in your financial future is not how much you're deducting a flashlight for or a meal that you make. Like the guys are better off focusing on things that are actually going to impact their net worth long term. And for me, that was real estate. But I know I was reading through your bio. It sounds like you have some opinions on this topic as well.
Yeah, no, I do. I love real estate. I think real estate is a good thing for guys to get into. It is a lot of the firefighters in our area. They will invest in property. As a firefighter, it's kind of easy to get into property a little bit. You're in the neighborhood. You just feel, the neighborhoods, the area of town, where properties will do well, have good resale value. And so I think you kind of have a little bit of edge, also a little bit of construction background a little bit, even if you aren't in the trades. As you go through, as you overhaul a house, you learn a lot about construction, whether you've never, lifted a hammer before in your lifetime, you learn on the job. So I think real estate is a good avenue for people to get into and invest for their future. So the BRRRR method with the whole buy, rehab, rent, refi, repeat, that is something that is really popular. People being able to go do that. The nice thing about real estate is when you go to sell your property, if you invest in another property, so like say you start in smaller low income housing and then all of a sudden you want to go into a multiplex, you could, sell your low income houses and do what they call like a like kind exchange, where you can sell one type of property and go into a similar type property, and then you can defer that gain that you would have had on those lower income properties and just roll that into the other one. So that's a nice feature. Also, real estate is, if you do the longer term rental, it's what they consider like passive income. And not a lot of people realize the difference between passive and active income, but I'll try to be concise about it. But active income is when you've got your own side business and you're actively going out and doing something. So maybe you're doing CPR classes or you're selling leather belts. That is active income. Active income is subject to self-employment tax, which is 15% in addition to your income tax. Passive income, if you're not passive with the rental, that income, it's not subject to that self-employment tax. And so that's a big tax savings there. So saving 15% on the money you make off of that rental property, that's huge. So it's always nice to have that passive income in there. But you have to be careful, because with the rental properties you can have nowadays with the Airbnb, short-term and long-term, those are treated differently. And so those short-term rentals, if you operate it like a hotel, then you get taxed like a hotel. So hotels are a business. It's active management of the property. And so if you are actively managing those properties, you're in there day in and day out, that income is treated like a Schedule C, which would be subject to the self-employment tax. There's other ways to do. If you have, we've got on my department, we have a realtor who also does real estate investing too. So firefighter by trade, but does real estate and then also flips houses and rents it. So he would be potentially considered a real estate professional with the number of hours he puts in. So that offers some other unique tax advantages if you can become a real estate professional. But a lot of it, you just kind of got to sit down and understand what your situation is. But I love long-term rentals as a good way to build wealth. It's a great way to plan for your future, plan for retirement. If you can handle the tenants, then it's a great way to build wealth.
I mean, the holy grail of tax planning is if you can figure out how to take your passive losses against active income, right? And you bring up short-term rentals, and there's the short-term rental loophole that everybody tries to do, or a real estate professional status that allows you to do that too. That's a lot of that stuff's over a lot of the guys' heads, but there's guys out there that understand it and that they're doing it. I can think of our apartment. We have probably like 2 or 3 guys that have Airbnb, so it's not out of the question. But I think a lot of it goes to education. Like, you just don't know what you don't know, and it's good to have things like this so guys can be exposed to it. Joe, I feel like I'm dominating the conversation. You got anything you want to chime in on here?
I do. So, interestingly, our last 2 shows, we had 3 guys who just recently retired. So they had we didn't talk about it, but I'm guessing they had pretty complex tax situations. Then the shows before that, we had a bunch of brand new guys who just joined the department or just transferred over to the department. And so my guess is their tax situations, for most of them, are probably pretty simple. So focusing on those guys, the less complex folks, like, what are some of the things that they can think about or they can deduct? Like, some of them, like one of the guys had a 6-hour commute to work. If they have an electric vehicle or if they have paying for their education, what are some of the things that those folks with less complex situations might want to think about in helping their tax situation?
That's a good question. I think it may be less complicated. They won't have as many sources of income, but if they are starting out like a family or on the early stages of their career, their income's going to be low enough they can take advantage of certain things. So one thing, we could talk about would be like education credits for kids. You get phased out of those as you get older. So as you're younger, like the education credits, it's 160,000 is where the American Opportunities Credit starts phasing out at. And so by the time you get later in your career, you are probably going to be phased out of that. If your wife works and you're working and you're picking up overtime, you're going to be phased out of that credit potentially. And so it's good to start doing some of the like retirement planning and stuff and education savings. If you've got kids, focus on putting some money away and accounts for them for their education. That way, it's not going to be as taxing down the road when they do get to college age. If they do have young kids as well, too, there's like dependent care credits. So if you're paying for daycare, you may be stay-at-home dad on your days off. But if your spouse, if you need daycare while your spouse is working, you can go ahead and deduct that. You can also deduct that dependent care stuff if your kids are in school and they have to go like the aftercare program, after school, before school care program. There's a cost to that. That can be deducted as well. You also mentioned the electric vehicles. There's not a better time than now to buy an electric vehicle as far as tax credits are concerned. Federal government, they have $7,500 tax credit available to people. California has another $7,500, I believe, that you can get as like a rebate. It's not through the taxes, but it's a rebate that they offer. So that's a lot of money going towards a vehicle. The vehicles, though, they keep changing. So before you go out and buy an electric vehicle, there's only certain vehicles that qualify, and the amounts vary by vehicle. So the dealers will know what qualifies. So if you go in and talk to a dealership, they'll be able to walk you through it. The IRS on their website will walk it through. But, in the last year, the vehicles that qualify have changed quite a bit. Some manufacturers like Tesla, a year ago, it didn't qualify. This year, it does qualify. So it's just that those laws keep changing and updating. And in 2024, they're going to offer it to where the dealers can actually take that credit for you in the dealership. So you could go in the dealership instead of waiting till next tax season to get your $7,500 tax credit. The dealership can apply for it on your behalf, and they can do it. So something to think about.
And that's nationwide?
That's going to be nationwide. The IRS one is nationwide, $7,500.
Interesting. Is there anything else new in 24 that folks should be aware of before they start tackling their taxes?
So right now we're recording this before year end, and usually last couple of weeks of the year, there's usually some surprises, but right now there's really not a lot of big surprises. The new thing coming out would be the tax vehicle. There are some new changes with energy credits as far as improvements to your house that you make. They've gone up. They calculate those slightly marginally higher. And, if you have new windows, doors, furnace, geothermal, something along those lines, it's a good time to go and reach out to your tax advisor just to see how that impacts you as well.
That's an interesting point. So can you walk us through, like, say I'm a firefighter, or probably not even a firefighter, anybody thinks they need some help doing their taxes, gives you a call, says, Mike, I need help. Can you take it from there and tell us, what does that look like, you helping somebody with their situation?
Yeah. So usually I start with getting a copy of the prior year tax return. That's usually the, first step, because that prior year tax return gives me insight as to what's happened in the past, what they've previously done, what type of income sources they have. But from there, we kind of look at their income, look at their family situation, their work situation. I try to understand like their whole picture, because that's how you can uncover maybe deductions and credits that they may qualify for. If they've been married in the past, I need to talk about like their divorce and their divorce decree to see how kids get deducted year in and year out and how some of that stuff's split. But, it really takes getting a conversation to understand them. From there, we look at the documents and we can prepare it from there. But you really need to understand the client, understand their life situation, their work situation before preparing the tax return.
And that can all be done virtually, I'm guessing, right?
Yep. Yeah, we do. We are 100% virtual. So we don't have any people in branches. The credit union has their branches set up, but when we did tax services, the credit union has a federal charter. So we have members throughout the country. So to serve all 50 states, we had to, figure out how we could do that. And virtual was the way to do it. So we have an online portal where clients upload their documents. We can share documents through there. It has a chat feature. We can chat back and forth. And then we do interviews just through Teams. We use Teams, Microsoft Teams, to do the interviews. And it worked really well. It gives you that personal touch. If people don't have the time, firefighters are always busy. They're, if they're on shift, whatever, sometimes a phone call is just, you go back to the old phone call and we go through things that way. I've had several tax interviews interrupted by the alarm going off and running out the door. We work with firefighters. That's who we're here for. So it doesn't hurt our feelings when you say, hey, got to go, and head off to the call. So, that.
One of the other things I'm learning about firefighters in general is they like to procrastinate. Like they don't RSVP until the last minute. They don't do anything till the last minute. And I'm guessing that's probably the case with filling out their taxes. How soon before the deadline do they need to contact you in order to get it done on time?
So if we haven't heard from people by April 1st and don't have documents, a lot of times after April 1st, we have to start moving towards like an extension. And so we can file tax extensions. We can give you up until, the extended due date to get the tax return done. But the issue is in order to avoid penalties and interest, you have to make sure you paid enough throughout the year. So the people that paid enough throughout the year, they're usually knocking on my door January 15th, say, hey, I got my W-2. Let's go ahead and get this filed so I can get my money back. The ones wait until April, they're usually the ones that owe. So, if you get to us a little bit sooner, even if you owe, we can at least tell you what you owe, and then you can settle up. There's also a lot of ways to settle up with the IRS. So if you do owe money, they offer like installment agreements, and there's different plans we can do. So if the reason is you can't pay, it's good to just have that conversation. Let's get the taxes at least done and ready to go so we know what we're looking at. That's one of the big things I try to promote to people is just figure out what the damage is. If you know the damage is going to be big, great, but let's specify big. Is it $10,000 big, $20,000 big, or is it $1,000? Let's figure it out, and then we can plan and we can make a game plan for how we address that.
Thanks for listening. This is Joe from Ventura Fire Foundation. We have an exciting lineup of free webinars for firefighter families in 2024. In February, James Boomhauer, a critical care transport specialist paramedic and lead peer support director, will talk about PTSD, how to recognize it, and build your resilience. The webinars are open to fire families throughout the U.S. and will be held on Zoom. There are limited seats available, though, so register soon. You can register on our website or through the link in the show notes. All of the webinars will be recorded and made available on our website and YouTube channel. Support from Vanguard Charitable made this series possible, and we thank them. Now back to the show.
The guys around here, everybody knows the Firefighters First Credit Union. But did you have exposure to them in Illinois, or were they? Or how did you end up here? How did that work out?
So I had seen them advertised in my LinkedIn feed, and I was like, this is cool. Credit union, fire department, looking for a tax person. I'm like, I kind of check all those boxes because one thing I hadn't mentioned yet, but my family, my dad, we had a local credit union in Springfield, and he ran that as long as I remember. And then when he passed away, my older brother took it over. And so I'm like, I've been on that board. And, so I had the credit union exposure. I had the fire. I'm like, I'm just going to go and send an email off to him and see what it's about. And from there, it's kind of, they hired me as a consultant initially to help get the tax stuff set up. And then the more I got there, the more I, met the people and learned a lot about them. I'm like, this is a great organization. I mean, from the CEO at the top all the way down to the branch people, they are truly committed to firefighters. Like that is, they don't just, put it on a bumper sticker and, say, hey, we care about firefighters. They live and breathe it every day. They all care about the fire service, firefighters in general. And so, I came up eligible for retirement this May, and I'm like, they offered me a full-time position there, and I hopped over to it. I'm like, this is a great position. So now I'm a full-time employee of the credit union, and it's been great.
Yeah, we're a big fan of the credit union. Their foundation, the Fire Family Foundation, right, Joe? Is that
yep.
Right? Yeah, they're donors for our foundation. They've funded some pretty cool initiatives that we've done. So they've come to our ball that we put on, and yeah, we love us some Firefighters First Credit Union people. What are they doing? What are they trying to make a push towards doing people's taxes, or is that a new program for them? I don't ever recall that. Like
this is new. Yeah, it's brand new. So they reached out to me, or I reached out to them, but we started up tax services last March. It went to the members. So March 15th, I believe it was the day the email was sent out to the membership that said, hey, we're offering taxes. And so that was kind of late. I mean, tax season starts in January and ends April 15th. So it was pretty late, but we did have really good response on the tax services. California last year, they had the automatic extension with the wildfires. All but 3 counties in California qualify for that automatic extension. So I think that helped us out a little bit too. But our plan was to offer, the tax services to the members, because about 6 years ago, they did a survey, and the members' number one service that they needed was help with taxes. And so they put a game plan in motion to, well, this is what the members want. How do we get there? And so that is where we're at today. It's finally come to fruition with the tax services being offered. We're getting ready shortly here to launch our bookkeeping and payroll services as well as part of the tax services. So if you come to us with, you have a small business, you need help with bookkeeping and payroll, we'll be able to help out there as well. But it's just their way of trying to circle back and make sure that the firefighters have the services they need to be successful financially.
What's the value proposition? Is it that you guys, firefighters, the deductions, how the game is played? Like, is that this kind of selling proposition?
That is the selling proposition. We know firefighters. We know, a firefighter in LA, a firefighter in New York, Chicago, everywhere in between. They have a lot of commonalities. They all have very similar features about them. You can walk into a firefighter convention, you kind of pick out, oh, that looks like so-and-so from my department, or, whatever. It just seems like there's a lot of commonalities. So that's what we focus on. We're focused on the commonalities that firefighters have. Rental properties is a big one. So we make sure we're up to speed on the rental properties, small business deductions, family deductions from education, dependent care credits. We focus on the things that the firefighters are focused on. So we're not focused on, big corporations. We're not focused on some of the other earned income credits that, lower income people get. We focus on the deductions and the taxes that our firefighters pay.
Yeah. What does this cost? What if someone wants to have you guys do the taxes, roughly?
So we start out, it's posted on the website, but we start out at $250 for a tax return. And so from there, it'll go up, but $250 is kind of the base price. And so if you've just got a W-2, maybe a couple W-2s, you're married, your wife, W-2, a little bit of interest from the credit union, that's going to be $250. If you start adding in a small business, it's going to go up from there. We kind of base the pricing off of the forms that are used, just because the forms kind of approximate the amount of work that's going to take. So gotcha. We wanted to be able to give people an estimate. If they want to know how much it's going to cost before they get into it, we want to provide that estimate to them. So they can call us up and say, hey, this is my prior year tax return. How much is it going to be? And we can kind of look at those forms and say, okay, this is what it's going to be, so that they have some frame of reference. And that way it's fair and consistent across the board.
Nice. That seems totally reasonable. That seems not bad at all. Now that you've kind of seen under the hood of I assume that were the majority of people that took advantage, like California firefighters, or? I think we had returns in, 20 different states represented when we did tax returns last year. Yeah. So it was, majority still is California though. I do have to say California is the big one. Any insights on like the differences that you can see from your perspective on a California fire service versus the rest of the country, or is that not apparent from what you're looking at?
There are some differences. The schedule's a big difference. I was a 24/48 schedule. California, the big change is trying to get with people and schedule appointments, because some guys, they'll be like, oh yeah, I traded some days. I'm work for the next week. I'm like, you're at work for the next week? What? But due to all their time trades and all that, they have longer times that they spend on shift. That was kind of one of the bigger things, more eye-opening things. But the deductions, it just kind of varies. We all have. It seems like every department has a rental real estate guy. There's probably a guy that teaches CPR everywhere. There's some that are just consistent from, department to department across the country. But
so I think that for the podcast, we have most of our listeners are either firefighters or family of firefighters. But I think we have quite a few who aren't, who are just kind of interested in the fire service. So to take advantage of your service, they have to be a member of the credit union. Is that correct?
No, actually, we are a QSO of the credit union, which just means we are a subsidiary organization of it. So we have flexibility on who we are able to do taxes for. That was intentional. We wanted to make sure we could serve the firefighter family. And sometimes when you go into a business venture, you may not have a firefighter who's your partner in that business. So we've opened it up to where we can serve members outside the credit union membership, but our focus still is the credit union members.
Yeah, for sure. And then if somebody, so I think when I was talking to you earlier, you mentioned, and tell me if I'm wrong about this, that the Thousand Oaks branch of the credit union is like their biggest branch, or has the most members. So if somebody wanted to walk into Thousand Oaks and get help with their taxes, what would they just connect them with you, or what would happen?
Yeah. So if you walk into a branch, they will connect you with me. That is the process. Since everything is virtual, there's not really a way for them to, conduct the interview or take the documents. We need to keep the documents separated out. We don't want just all your tax documents going into a branch, and then there's a lot of issues surrounding that. So we've tried to avoid that.
And so I assume you guys have a website or whatever they could also go to get the process started.
Yes, and we can maybe put that in the show notes on the website. But yeah, the website, you can get started through the website. You can give the credit union a phone call, and option 5 right now, and the thing is tax services. So you can reach us through there. Even if you put an inquiry on the credit union's website, they'll go ahead and put you in contact with me as well.
I have one last question of substance. I don't know, Peter, if you have any others that...
Go for it.
So I should have asked this earlier, but we're a charity, and we make our revenue, our income, the way we're able to do anything is through donations and that sort of thing. How are charitable donations handled tax-wise? What should we be telling our donors of small gifts and our donors of potentially big gifts who may want to leave the foundation of their estate plan? What should we be telling them about the tax benefits of donating to charity?
So it kind of depends on the donor. Bigger gifts, there's a lot more flexibility with what we can do tax-wise. There's like charitable remainder trust. There's a lot of tax planning things that you can do with larger charitable gifts. And if they are planning a larger charitable gift, I would recommend having them consult with the tax person prior to that. As far as the smaller gifts, it depends on whether or not they can itemize their deductions at the federal level. The itemized deduction level is up pretty high nowadays. That was part of 2017 tax law changes. There's a lot of clients that no longer can itemize anymore. And so if they can't itemize, then they're not going to be able to deduct that on their federal tax return. But in California, they can still deduct it if they itemize down there. Yeah.
Awesome. Anything else, Pete? Those are helpful.
No, that's the gist of what I wanted to chat about too. We appreciate you coming on. I think it's valuable to have someone in your role that understands firefighters, available to do their taxes. And I think, everybody, the reputation of the credit union is good. And I think people that bank there generally love you guys. And I think it's a valuable service. And if you don't bank there, you should definitely consider it. But thanks for coming on, and appreciate the advice and chopping it up about the fire department in general. Any last things you want to share, Mike? Or
no, I just really appreciate you having me on, Peter, Joe. It's nice talking with both of you. Nice meeting you. Just reach out to us. Tax season is upon us, so no time like the present to reach out to us and get that conversation started.
Awesome. Thanks for coming on. Appreciate it.
All right. Thank you.
So that was super interesting. Not the most exciting subject, talking about taxes, but it's something that we all have to do. And I think the number one thing that I learned is just talk to him. When it's time to do your taxes, unless you just have one W-2 and no property, talk to him and they'll lead you down the right path for sure.
Yeah, I think the one of the biggest blind spots for firefighters, and we talked about it on the show, is thinking you can do it all on your own. I'm going to do this myself. I'll get on the internet. I'll research it. I got this. And when you're dealing with things that there's professionals out there who do, like CPAs, it's a no-brainer, especially $250 to do a tax return. Like that's a no-brainer. Like if you make one mistake, it's probably going to cost you way more than that in tax you paid when you maybe shouldn't have,
Yeah. So it was interesting for me. Enjoyed stepping into Jason's toes. I don't think we ever actually mentioned on the show specifically, but Jason was promoted to battalion chief. And so his time over the next year or so is going to be tougher to get him to schedule these. So we may be looking in the future for other people to step in and help co-host for either him or you, and just kind of widen the net a little bit about involving people with the show.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, big congrats to Jason. That's a big deal for him, for sure.
Yeah, and then just a couple of other things since I'm allowed to talk on this one that I want to get out. One, we have this webinar coming in February 20th on PTSD in the fire service. And it's really geared towards not only firefighters, but families and spouses. And we have this great presenter, James Boomhauer, who's out of Massachusetts. He was recommended to us. He's going to be on the podcast in January. I think it'll be the show that aired just before this one. So everyone can go to our website to sign up for that. And then the last thing that folks can do that will really help us out, that we don't, I think, as a show, really emphasize enough, is to go to wherever you listen to this show, either Apple, iTunes, or Spotify, and subscribe. And then, put in a sentence or two to rate the show, because that will help us to increase in the algorithms for those podcast platforms that will show up much higher the more subscribers we have and more reviews we get. So if you like the show, if you've listened to an episode or two, please just go and subscribe. You don't even have to listen to every show, but just subscribe and put in a quick rating. We'd certainly appreciate it.
Yeah, for sure. Anyhow, thanks, Joe, for doing the podcast with me. And maybe we'll do it again.
For sure. It's a lot of fun. Thanks, Peter. Talk to you soon.